Crazy title, right? I mean, I'm the Transit guy. T.E.D. is literally my profile picture. But I mean this as a Zombies fan since World at War Knocked, who's played each map as they've released since Black Ops 1. Transit has a special place in my heart, despite it being an unfinished mess. It has a charm to it that can't be matched. Its atmosphere, its lore, cut content, all the elements that make it up is so compelling to me in spite of its gameplay shortcomings. Heck, I love it so much I solo round 100 in it. You don't do that unless you like a map at least a little. I would think. So when I say that BO7's Ashes of the Damned is not only an expansion, but a realization of the Transit idea, that comes from the heart. Now, Ashes may not be the Transit remake in terms of layout, it certainly is in its concept, theming, and design. The best way to highlight this is to go through the progression of both maps to explain how this is achieved. The spawn areas for both maps are different in their layouts because they are completely different locations. But they are similar in the fact that they both provide the player with their main method of experiencing the map. With Ashes, it's Old Tessie, and with Transit, it's the Turbine. Yes, you see, this is where the big difference between the two maps is most prominent. The main method for accessing new areas, features like buildables and power, is through the Turbine on Transit, while on Ashes, it's the truck itself. This is the major difference between the two maps that as you go to each of the locations becomes more and more clear. Because right off the bat, you build T.E.D. into Tessie to gain access to the truck that you control. However, with Transit, you build the Turbine, which is used to not only open the power door from spawn, but many other elements of the map. Most notably the teleporter system, which you can only use with the Turbine before the power is on. With the bus on Transit, you're beholden to its schedule if you want to use it to get from point A to point B. Otherwise, you'll have to take it on foot and deal with the denizens. Now, the Turbine can be used to run faster, knife faster, and therefore deal with the denizens much more efficiently, but it's still a tedious affair. Here is where the first deviation begins. With the bus, you can only go one direction, through the tunnel to the diner. But with Tessie, you can either go to Farm or Blackwater Lake. Now, of course, you could run to town in Transit, but doing that, again, is tedious and dangerous because of the lava pool. There, of course, is the teleporter system, but we'll talk about that more when we reach the next location. Taking the vehicles, we arrive at our first stops. Diner for Transit, and Farm and Blackwater Lake for Ashes. Here is where Transit's gameplay design starts to already come into conflict. At the diner, you have the box, Speed Cola, which you can't buy because there's no power, and the shield buildable. Now, you can place down the Turbine to buy Speed Cola, but unless you want to keep its effect, it has to stay on next to it. Otherwise, it's essentially a dead perk slot. There is also, again, the shield, which is useful and would go on to become a staple to the mode in Black Ops 3 and 4. But on this map, you rarely see anyone ever using it. Why? Because there's one other piece of equipment that is far more important, as you need it for every other aspect of the map. One of those being the power doors for the bus parts. Now, here is something that both maps do share, but one does far better, and that is upgrading the vehicles. The bus is like a mobile fortress, which is very easily defendable as all its entrances, besides two, are barriers that the zombies will have to tear down. You can use the bus grill mounted on the front to run over zombies and prevent them from coming through the front window. So to do that, along with adding the ladder for easy access to the roof from the outside of the bus, and the hatch to do the same from the inside, you have to keep the Turbine on you to open up the power doors. So that means you really can't afford to get rid of the Turbine until you're fully set up in the game. So essentially we have a perk that we can't buy and a buildable we can't use. Great. Now let's switch over to Ashes. We'll talk about Blackwater and Farm together as they essentially have the same mechanics and idea behind them, that being their own individual power switches. So right off the bat, these locations not only have more value, but usefulness, as you can buy the perks at these locations for doing the power challenges. And the perks themselves also is important, because every location you travel to has 2 on them, unlike Transit, which sometimes has only 1 or none. And with Farm having Stamina Up on it as one of its first stops, it really gives more opportunities to run by yourself, unlike Transit, which doesn't have Stamina Up available until the end of your standard journey. But unlike Transit, where you can, if you really wanted to, run to any location right from the beginning of the game, on Ashes, you'll need to use the truck to break down the barriers that divide the locations from the foggy areas. This places more value on the truck rather than the bus, making it a more active involvement in your game, as it's the main mechanic that sets the map apart, so it should have value in it. But once you get the power on at Blackwater and Farm, you can now use the teleporter system, which are jump pads, but essentially teleporters. This is something that both maps have in common, but Ashes does so much better. You see, the teleporters can instantly take you back and forth between the locations that you've turned on the power at. That way you always know where they're going to take you. And there's a sense of map flow even with the teleporter system. Plus, they're limited in where you can go and the fact that they cost money. You can't just teleport from one location to any other. So if you want to skip using the truck to get to the other side of the map quickly, you have to spend the points on multiple different teleporters to do so. Now, on Transit, a similar teleporter system does exist. You can teleport to anywhere on the map. However, the 2 main issues with this are, 1, you have to use the turbine before the power's turned on to use them, and 2, you teleport to a completely random location. The Transit teleporter system is one of the main reasons why there is terrible flow on this map. For example, if someone goes down at Bus Depot and you're at Farm, there is absolutely no way you're going to be able to revive that person. Contrast that to if someone goes down on the other side of the map on Ashes. If you take both jump pads, you can get to that player and revive them. But not only that, just getting around the map yourself opens up so much more with Ashes because the teleporters are consistent. Of course, they're not as easy to access right off the bat like Transit, for as long as you have the turbine, you can go anywhere. The trade-off comes to where you want to be consistent and use the bus, where you're beholden to wherever it is on the map. Do you want to go exactly where you want to go? Well, then you have to run, which takes a long time. Or do you want to get somewhere quicker, but have to deal with the random teleporter mechanic? It's essentially pick your poison. There's no winners on Transit. But with Ashes, as you progress through the map, open up more areas with the truck and turn on the power for the individual locations, the map flow opens up and allows you to get to places much faster and easier.
May I suggest you run?
Now, the second stops are interesting, because on Transit it could be 2 locations, and on Ashes it can only ever be 1. That one being Ashwood, which is essentially the town of Ashes of the Damned. This is the main hub area, the central point where everything flows into, and where many important items are located, one of them being the upgrade location for the truck, and the other being Jug. This is also the only location on the map where every teleporter goes to. The map is laid out like a figure 8, or rather an infinity sign, Ashwood being the very center where both parts converge into. And of course, it makes sense to place the most important perk in the most important location. Now, Transit tries to do this, but its map progression is what's holding it back from working. After the bus leaves the diner on Transit, there's a fork in the road that you can take running on foot to immediately get to town, where you not just have Jug, but Stamina Up, 2 of the most important perks on the map. You also have access to the bank, which if you have money saved up, pretty much gives you unlimited access and resources to the map. This is also the location that later in the game where you can use Pack-a-Punch. But sadly, even though Pack is at this location, we can't use it yet. Now, on both maps, you need to get the power on in order to gain access to the Pack-a-Punch machine, which makes sense. The pack quest in theory is actually very easy on both maps, but it's the execution that separates them. On Ashes, you need to get the power on at this location that gives you access to the garage, where you can now place the Pack-a-Punch on the truck. Which this really opens up the traversal aspect of this map, because as soon as you get Pack on the truck, you now have the speed boost, along with a more durable hull and faster movement speed overall. So this location has so much more value on it because of this. This is one of the major elements that differentiates the two maps, and it helps place much more importance on the main draw, that being the vehicle. On Transit, Pack-a-Punch is underneath the town, which you can only access after you place down a turbine at the power station, have the power turned on, and make one of the longest and most irritating runs in Zombies history, hoping the turbine won't break before you get into the pack room, which, if you cut through here using the path from the diner, you won't have access to it yet. And again, you also won't have access to Jug or Stamina unless you leave the turbine at one of those machines, which if you're going to be running immediately to the power station from here, you're not going to want to do that unless you don't plan on packing. This is the problem with coming to town from Diner. You're pretty much in the exact same situation where you don't really have access to the perk machines. You have the turbine, but you can't really buy them yet. And there's no wall buys at this location. So unless you moved the box at Diner and it came here, there's nothing you can really do. Now, if you didn't get off the bus, you're then taken to the other second location. This map's version of Farm, which the layout is very similar to Ash's version of Farm. The house is just moved slightly to the left next to the barn. What can you do here? Well, you can use the turbine to open up one of the power doors and hopefully get one of the bus parts. You have another perk that isn't turned on. There's a second buildable, that being the auto turret, which if you build it inside the house, it can be used to kill zombies for you without using any ammo. Only problem is that you need a turbine to power it. And because you can't carry two buildables at the same time, if you want to use it, you're going to have to pick it up, place it down where you're going to use it, then go back, pick up the turbine, and place it next to it. There is so much wrong here that it could almost be its own separate video. But the point is, you're not really going to be getting much out of the turret, at least at this point in the game, because you have much more important things to be worrying about, like getting perks that don't disappear off your body when you pick up the turbine. Now, there is one more useful thing that could be at this location, but that's entirely dependent on you from a previous match. The refrigerator allows you to store a weapon inside of it, and if it's a packed weapon, you gain access to that too. It also carries over from both Buried and Die Rise, along with the money in the bank, so if you did yourself a favor and place a decent weapon in there, you at least have something that has firepower for this early in the game. If you haven't picked up on it by now, the bus route, as in getting on the bus and allowing it to take you to each of the locations, there's no real map progression on Transit doing it this way. You're not getting the power turned on, you're not getting any perks, and you're not really able to use any buildables, unless you just completely forego the turbine altogether. This is what I mean when I say that the map layout and its mechanics don't jive with its progression whatsoever. Everything is just backwards. Which this now brings us to our third and final locations.
Ah, this building looks familiar.
Now, I call these the real last stops because even though technically, if you're just using the bus on Transit, town will be the last place you go to, if you know how the map works and you're playing it again, the power station is the last place you go to. And on Ashes, as you have the choice of going to either the Cosmodrome or the diner, those are the last two stops on that map's journey. What's very interesting about these locations is, unlike the first three, these don't have a power switch on them. The power is already on at these locations, and therefore the teleporters that take you to each of them and back to Ashwood are already active as soon as you get there, which I think this was a good idea. Because at this point in the game, if there had to be an individual power switch at every single location, it would get a bit tiring and old. Instead, at the diner, you actually get the second main upgrade for Old Tessie, the Abomination Mouths, which gives the truck more health and a main attack, used to shoot enemies and even passively attack zombies when parked. Typically, unless you're doing the Easter egg, this is usually the last upgrade that you'll get for the truck in an average game. And if we compare these vehicles side by side, look at what they bring to their respective maps, and look at how their upgrade processes work, we see one where it was placed on a large map for you to improve it, and the other where a map was built around it to make the whole experience better. Sure, the truck can get destroyed if it's damaged enough, which a very similar thing can happen to the bus if you allow the Avogadro to disable it. There are pros and cons to both. One, you don't have to worry about controlling it yourself, it's completely automated. However, while the other one is more fragile and you have to drive it manually, moving around the map is now entirely in the player's hands, not the game's. And now we finally reach the most important place on Transit, the power station. Important because this is the area that finally allows you to get rid of the turbine, so you can now start using the other things that are on this map, as well as the Wonder Weapon. You see, had Transit done a different idea where each individual location had its own power switch that stayed on for a temporary amount of time, sort of like the water buckets from Zetsubo, it would have been more tolerable than having to lug this fan attached to a mannequin body all over the place. The only reason why no one uses any of the other buildables on this map and why the turbine has so much value placed on it is because you're so limited into what you can actually access until you turn on the power. Which is one of the main reasons why, right off the bat, as soon as people build the turbine, they immediately jump into the teleporter and just keep teleporting until they land near power. Or at least town, so they can gain access to the bank, buy both jug and stamina up using the turbine, and then slowly run to the power station and turn it on. Again, with Transit, there's actually a lot more player freedom than you might think. You can go anywhere you want. You can do anything you want, and with the bank, you can get Pack-a-Punched and all your perks on round 1. But it's going to be a long, tedious, and irritating round 1. This is why Ashes of the Damned is the improved, expanded version of the Transit idea, because it takes the concept of a multi-location map separated by dangerous areas of fog with extremely aggressive enemies with a unique mode of transportation and makes all these things have value and importance. Having the Pack-a-Punch on Tessie was a genius move, because if it wasn't and just at one static spot like it is on Transit, as soon as you use the truck to get there, no one's using the truck ever again. They're just going to use the teleporters. But with Pack being on the truck, along with it having multiple upgrades that actually make it useful for killing zombies, now it's not just a transportation feature on the map, it's the main feature on the map. Sure, the bus is iconic, but it's not realized. It's not well thought out, and it's certainly not even the most optimal way to get from point A to point B. The problem is that there is no efficient way to get from point A to point B. Again, this is all the overarching game mechanics that make Ashes so much better. But that doesn't even include the additional content. The Easter eggs on Transit are some of the shortest and most shallow in the whole series. And the only real side quest that there is using the bus hatch, not on the bus, but on the top of the diner to get the Galvanuckles. While on Ashes, the main Easter egg is long, expanding, and even leads you to getting another upgrade for the truck, the Wonderwaft turret. There are side quests, little things to do at each of the locations. The map is much more fleshed out. Again, this is all due to the fact that Transit was unfinished. It wasn't a fully realized idea. And Ashes of the Damned proved that Transit's idea, the concept of this style of map, can absolutely work when done right.